Questions are a doorway to the one who answers. Questions and doubts can leave us feeling unsettled, even troubled inside. But a question is not a disruption in the universe. It's a legitimate movement in the soul. And an answer isn't the final word on a matter either. It's a response that can move the soul from one level of understanding to another. This rhythm of questions and answers never goes away. It's built into the fabric of existence. God didn't create the phenomenon of questions to humiliate us. In fact, the Badíʿ calendar reflects this rhythm. It honors human questions through the month of questions each year and recognizes the role of divine answers in the year of the answer every 19 years. We also see this rhythm in the writings themselves enacted in real time. Recently I noticed it in the opening lines of a largely unknown tablet called Lawh Sarráj. It's a 40-page discourse in which Baha'u'lláh responds to questions sent by Ali Muhammad Sarráj, a devoted follower of Mirza Yahya. I'm not going into the details of that exchange. What interests me is the opening gesture, because in a single paragraph, Baha'u'lláh reveals something profound about the nature of spiritual inquiry. The tablet begins with a declaration: He is the answerer. What does that mean? At first glance, it could sound like Baha'u'lláh is simply saying, He has answers. But looked at more deeply, it's a statement about identity. He is the answerer. This is who he is, not just something he does when he feels like it. Answering, then, is not a reaction to provocation or ignorance. It's an aspect of divine identity, part of the rhythm of revelation itself. Immediately after this declaration, Baha'u'lláh describes how Sarraj's letter reached our presence and was perceived before the throne. What could that mean? It suggests that Sarraj's question was lifted up, elevated into the divine realm. Whatever the mechanics of that, the point is clear. The question was taken seriously. It was dignified before it was even answered. And this is striking because Sarráj was not a loyal disciple. He was aligned with Mirza Yahya and unlikely to accept Baha'u'llah's response. By human logic, his question should have been dismissed. Yet Baha'u'lláh not only receives it, he elevates it. This tells us something important. The worthiness of the question does not depend on the worthiness of the questioner. The divine identity as answerer is not conditional. God is the answerer and will answer unless it is not his will to do so. Baha'u'lláh then outlines the question itself, which is interesting because it's actually a subtle trap designed to catch him out. Sarráj asked, "How is it possible for the letter of the most exalted to be transformed into the most debased?" He believed he had created an impossible dilemma. And yet, despite this sign of ill will, Baha'u'lláh calls the question most acceptable. He praises the act of asking. He affirms that those unable to grasp divine mysteries should seek answers from the fountain of divine knowledge, so that they may rest on the couch of certitude and tranquility. What do we take from this? Baha'u'lláh is not out to discipline us for not knowing things. He identifies himself as the answerer because he doesn't want his servants weighed down by their doubts and difficulties. He wants them at ease. But the spiritual path toward that ease cannot begin with certainty. It must begin with seeking, and seeking requires the courage to ask. We often treat our questions as signs of weakness, evidence that our faith is insufficient or our understanding incomplete. But here the question is carried into the divine presence. It is honored, it is welcomed. It becomes part of the revelatory movement. Baha'u'llah expresses this dynamic plainly in his tablet to Wafa. He says, "It behoveth everyone in this day to ask God that which he desireth, and thy Lord will heed his petition with wondrous and undeniable verses." He invites people to ask. He does not treat questions as interruptions or irritations. He welcomes them. From this perspective, a question becomes a doorway between him and his servants, even those who do not like him. Asking becomes an act of devotion. In a world that often treats questions as threats, this is a different vision. It tells us that the soul grows by asking. It tells us that God honors the seeker's uncertainty. It tells us that revelation is not a lecture, it is a relationship. And perhaps most beautifully, it tells us that the one who answers is already leaning toward us, waiting for the moment when our question becomes a doorway to step through.